Hi, my name is Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss a huge contract that the government gave to what would appear to be a false front company without any of the normal procedures being followed, as well as the impending court case for it. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, this contract concerns PPE for our healthcare workers. That issue hasn't gone away. In order to meet the demands, of course, of the COVID pandemic, you know, the PPE that the government were told to stockpile last year before this all happened, and they ignored that because we're stockpiling for an emergency, it might never happen. Oh, it's happened. Then they were told in February, right, we need this really quickly. Yeah, we'll get right onto that. And then they ignored that. And then they were told, you know, look, you need to sort this out. So they sort of dragged the feet a little bit, found a few ways to put the money, supposedly for PPE, into the hands of their donors and mates. And one contract is absolutely enormous, £108 million. Now, remember when Boris Johnson was ill with COVID? I remember this. And Dominic Raab pretended to step in. Now, I recall in Prime Minister's questions him being asked by Keir Starmer, why are we too slow with getting the PPE we need? And Dominic Raab was saying, well, you know, it's all to do with checks on the tenders, and we have to go through a process, and we have to check that it's all what we want and it's best value for money. All the usual stuff that is, yes, absolutely part of normal tender procedures. How odd then that they award a £108 million contract, which is huge even by the standards of a contract that they'll give to a Tory donor. It's about a third of the value of all the PPE contracts, because that comes to about 350 million. To a single company. Nothing, you know, so far untoward about that, you may say. Fine. But it's a single company that doesn't seem to make PPE. But also a contract that wasn't advertised. Actual PPE countries in this country, ones who produce PPE, had no idea that this contract existed. They were not told about it. And that's not where the dodginess ends. Because the Good Law Project, which, you know, for those who don't know, they're famous for their involvement in tackling Boris Johnson's government over both the prorogation of Parliament last autumn and the subsequent threats to ignore the Benn Act as well. They've begun proceedings to sue the government over this decision. There are a number of questions that they have, for which they have not as yet received an answer. They want to know where the contract was advertised, because no actual producers of PPE knew anything about it. Is this one of these things where they stapled the adverts to the bottom of a lamppost somewhere in Aberdeen? They want to know, actually it wouldn't be there because the company that got it is somewhere else. They want to know where the contract was advertised. First question. Then they want to know why the contract was awarded to, get this, Crisp Websites Limited. I mean, that sounds like the sort of company that produces PPE, doesn't it? So if it was not advertised, why did they award this contract directly to this company? They noted, for example, you are under certain circumstances permitted to award a contract directly without all the mess of advertising. I mean, apart from anything else, you know, emergency on. If there is a single supplier, for example, if you want something as the government, and there's only one company that produces it, well, what's the point of advertising? Fair enough. Thing is, though, that we have companies who produce PPE. And the company that benefited from this contract is not one of them. But, you know, maybe the government would argue that none of them would be able to fulfill the entire order. So, yeah, you've got all these companies, and this company produces this, and this company produces this. But this is a huge contract with an awful lot of different types of PPE. None of those individual companies could do it. So their argument would presumably be that the only company that could possibly fulfill this whole order would be Crisp Websites Limited. So who are they? Huge producers of all manner of medical PPE, despite the name, no doubt? No. They've never so much as produced a face mask from old sock puppets. No, in fact, their total assets is reported as £18,047. This is a company that has total assets less than many normal working people if they have a mortgage or something. You know, a company whose assets total less than £20,000 being given a £108 million contract directly. That is beyond irregular. The government may suggest, like I said, that there was an urgent need to award the contract, so you circumvent a few procedures. Sure. However, this falls a little bit flat because, again, like the Good Law Project note, this contract was awarded months after we knew there was an urgent need for PPE. This wasn't a contract that went out in February when we knew at that point there was an urgent need. This went out April. They also want to know how the money was awarded to Crisp Websites Limited. Was it just handed over as cash, for example? Also, back to this urgent need argument that the government may wish to use. So this is for a 12-month contract. Now, you can't say that there's an urgent need right now, or this is back in April, to award a contract for something in a year's time. So in April, there wasn't an urgent need to award a contract for something in March 2021. You would just issue the emergency contract for a month or two, preferably when it was urgent, which is actually in February, which they didn't. They wasted a couple of months. But you would still just award it for a couple of months and give yourself the time to throw out the rest of the contract for normal tender, in order to get the best deal for the taxpayer who we're stumping up for this. And again, we're going to have to keep coming back to this. How on earth they thought that a company that doesn't produce PPE was in the unique position to provide emergency PPE when actual producers were not even approached about their capacity to do so. How, for example, does Boris Johnson or Matt Hancock or Dominic Raab know that the companies that produce PPE were not able to fulfill this order, or that a conglomerate of them was not able to fulfill this order if they didn't approach them? In addition, the rules state that upon the awarding of a contract, this has got nothing to do whether it's done under emergency conditions or not, upon the awarding of a contract, you have to publish the notice within 30 days. The contract was awarded on April the 10th. Been a little bit more than 30 days now. And there are a number of other housekeeping questions that are to be asked by these legal team. But this is truly staggering, isn't it? I mean, I understand how contracts are awarded by Conservative governments. I'm not someone who's just recently had the scales fall from my eyes on this. You chuck the party or a minister a few tens of thousands of pounds and you get a contract worth millions. We've seen it time after time after time. But they at least go through the pretense of considering options before deciding to award it to Tory donors or their mates or their families. The paperwork is there at least, and people can make up their own minds about whether or not it's a coincidence that the bulk of public money goes to Conservative donors and mates and family of Conservative ministers. But this doesn't even bother to play the game. It's an absolutely classic case of Boris Johnson's government believing that they don't even have to pretend to have any propriety. They were born to rule. They absolutely believe this. This is a classic case. They were born to rule and they are free to do as they wish. Why go to all the trouble of pretending to consider contracts when they're just going to give it to who they want? I mean, that's effort. No need for it. So finally, about this company, Crisp Websites Limited, with its less than £20,000 of assets. It's clearly a front, isn't it? They couldn't even pretend to deliver on such a large contract. We all know how subsidiary companies work for hiding connections. So who is it a front for? Well, according to the Financial Times, it's a front for PestFix, a pest control company who employs 16 people. Just the type to be able to fulfill a £108 million contract for medical PPE, which they don't produce. Oh, that reminds me. One of the co-founders of PetFix did give a bit of an explanation as to why the contract was awarded. The government won't say why the contract was awarded, but PestFix will. They say it's because they made a competitively priced offer. That is odd though, isn't it? Because how can they have made an offer if the contract wasn't advertised? And how can it be competitive if they were the only ones to make an offer? I mean, competition by definition needs competitors. They didn't have any. And this is just the most egregious example that we have for now. You know, there's been £350 million worth of PPE contracts being given out to the government, but even that is, you know, small compared to the sum total of £1.7 billion worth of contracts related to the coronavirus pandemic that have been given out by the government, which again the Financial Times notes the vast majority of it was done so without any competitive tender at all. They just gave the money to whomever they wished. And this is why a judicial review is now being sought to tackle the government over this. But there it is. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.